Good evening. You are truly very welcome here. You are most certainly welcome indeed.
Konstantin Panyushkin, Channel 1. Your visit to China.
Louder, please.
Konstantin Panyushkin, Channel 1. Your visit to China is unprecedented. You have been working for 4 days already. During this time, you have met with Chairman Xi many times. How do you assess the results of the Russian-Chinese negotiations? And what is the most important outcome of this multi-day visit?
It really is a multi-day visit, as you said. This is primarily because there were several significant events held here. When we were meticulously planning this important work, we organized it in such a thoughtful way so that there would be absolutely no need to travel such long distances multiple times. Let me just remind you, there was first the SCO summit, then the significant trilateral meeting between Russia, Mongolia, and China, and finally the important visit to the People's Republic of China itself. And I must say that this particular format of work allows us not only to engage in discussions at the negotiating table, but most importantly, it makes it entirely possible to meet multiple times in a more informal setting and to have absolutely friendly, informal, and genuinely open conversations on any topic of mutual interest. And this turned out to be very important and exceedingly useful. As for the overall results, in my considered opinion, they are quite positive. The significant documents that were adopted and adopted by all participants are clearly aimed at the future. In this particular regard, I would especially and sincerely like to highlight the significant Chinese initiative on global governance. It seems to me that this is indeed very timely, and most importantly, this crucial initiative is specifically aimed at fostering positive and constructive cooperation between the various countries that have gathered at the recent summit in China and our potential and prospective partners among those nations that, as of today, do not yet wish to openly declare such a partnership. All of this coming together and such a profound unity among all those who have gathered here is a very important and significant demonstration of a truly positive attitude and the strong confidence that we will indeed be able to fully achieve our clearly set goals. Please go ahead.
Quadrivodimschik, yes. Sorry. Lana Samsonia, Interfax. I wanted to continue the topic of your visit to China, but regarding the bilateral agenda, a substantial package of documents was signed as a result of your visit. And probably first and foremost, these are documents related to the Power of Siberia 2 project. This project has actually become the leitmotif of all high-level negotiations in recent times, and even a kind of indicator of the relationship between Russia and China in the world. In your opinion, do the agreements that have been reached essentially nullify the speculations that exist about the relationship between Russia and China in the world, as well as attempts by outside forces to interfere or influence the relations between the two countries?
To be honest, I don't understand what you're talking about because I'm focused on my current work and try not to get distracted by rumors and speculations. As you mentioned, this is work that has actually been going on for a long time, and we've been discussing it with our partners for quite a while. There were several possible roads, each with its own pros and cons, and the negotiations took a long time, more than just a year. But as we both profoundly know, it's a widely recognized fact that the global economy, even though we are currently seeing significant recessions in many countries, for example, in the leading economies of the Eurozone, is still steadily developing, especially within the dynamic Asia-Pacific region. The demand for energy resources is growing, including in the Chinese economy, which continues to be one of the driving forces of the global economy. More than 5% growth. After all, this growth is based on an already large foundation. Some people say their GDP growth rate has slowed down. Yes, it has slowed down, but still, the base has grown significantly during this time. And the more than 5% growth we are seeing today is a different 5% than it was 10 or 15 years ago. That's the point. And what does this lead to? It leads to an increased demand for energy resources. Well, finally, after extensive and often challenging discussions, the negotiating parties have successfully reached a comprehensive and mutually acceptable consensus. You know, it's important to understand that there is absolutely no charity involved here from either side whatsoever. These are fundamentally and entirely mutually beneficial agreements, meticulously implemented and carefully structured based on sound and established market principles. And these fundamental market principles are based specifically on the prevailing conditions in this particular region. And by the way, the established price for this product is not set according to today's current market prices, but rather according to a clear and predefined specific formula. This comprehensive formula is entirely objective, transparent, and fundamentally market-based in its application. So there is a clear demand from the rapidly growing Chinese economy, and we fortunately have the substantial capacity to readily supply this essential raw material. Well, in the final analysis, this particular matter is not directly tied to the agenda of our current meeting. It's simply the positive outcome of many years of dedicated work by economic entities on both sides. Of course, this will generate significant competitive advantages for our Chinese friends, because I repeat, they will obtain the product at balanced market prices, not at some exorbitant rates. Okay, unlike what we are currently seeing in the Eurozone, for example. And most importantly, the supply is stable and reliable. Everyone is satisfied, everyone is pleased with this outcome. Well, to be honest, so am I. After all, Gazprom is one of our leading companies, and it is expanding into new markets. Overall, through Mongolia, we will have 50 billion. Currently, there are 38. Then a couple more additional routes, which will also significantly increase. In total, it will ultimately amount to well over 100 billion cubic meters of natural gas.
May I?
Yes, go ahead. Pavel, please. Otherwise, they'll take him over there to another location.
Good evening. Pavel Zarubin, Russia TV channel. You often talk about, and in fact you mentioned it yesterday as well, the root causes of the Ukrainian crisis when the country was being dragged into NATO. But now we see that the European leaders who are making statements and discussing certain security guarantees for Ukraine are almost entirely focused on the issue of deploying their troops in Ukraine. At the same time, many continue to insist on Ukraine's accession to the EU as well. But we can also clearly see that the European Union is rapidly, right before our very eyes, transforming from what was once primarily an economic union into something closely resembling a military political bloc, with almost constant aggressive decisions and increasingly aggressive statements. How would you comment on all these significant developments?
I profoundly agree with those who firmly believe that every sovereign country inherently possesses the fundamental right to independently choose, to meticulously select for itself the most appropriate and effective system for comprehensively ensuring its own national security. This applies to all countries, including Ukraine. But this also means that the security of one country cannot be ensured at the expense of the security of another country, in this case, the Russian Federation. We have always strongly objected to Ukraine becoming a full member of this significant North Atlantic bloc, but we have never at any point questioned its inherent right to conduct its economic and commercial activities precisely as it wishes without any external interference. This also applies to membership in the EU.
May I continue about Ukraine?
Go ahead now, please.
Hello, Vladimir Vladimirovich, Alexander Yunushev.
Hello.
When people now discuss the efforts of Russia and the US for a peaceful settlement in Ukraine, the formula security guarantees in exchange for territory is being mentioned more and more often. Is this in line with what you discussed with Trump in Alaska? And what do your words mean when you said that Russia is ready to join in developing these guarantees? In your opinion, who should actually be the guarantor? And if I may, about Zelensky, is there any point in meeting with him under the current circumstances? Is it possible to reach any agreements at such a meeting? Thank you.
The very first part, once again.
So the current US efforts, there are some speculations that there is a formula of security guarantees in exchange for territory.
No, we have never raised the issue in that way or discussed it like that. Security guarantees, of course, as I often say, and it is a point I frequently emphasize, we believe that every country should possess these essential guarantees, a robust security system, including naturally Ukraine. However, this fundamental principle is not connected to any exchanges whatsoever, and most especially not to territorial exchanges. Honestly, I want to emphasize this. We are not fighting so much for territory as we are for human rights and the rights of the people living in these territories. to speak their own language, to live within their own culture and traditions passed down from previous generations, from their fathers, grandfathers, and so on. That is precisely what this is truly about, first and foremost. And if these people, through legitimate electoral and democratic procedures, including comprehensive referendums, have clearly expressed their collective will to be part of the Russian Federation, that deeply held opinion must be fully respected. That is what democracy is. I want to remind those who have forgotten this. And besides all that, it fully complies with international law. I also want to remind you of the very first articles of the United Nations Charter, which explicitly state the right of nations to self-determination. But we do not link one with the other, territories and security guarantees. Of course, you could say these are related topics, but we do not directly connect them. And this specific issue was not raised in that particular way during the extensive discussion that took place in Anchorage. As for the possibility of potential meetings with Mr. Zelensky, I have already comprehensively spoken about this matter. In general, I have never ruled out the possibility of such a meeting. Is there any point in these meetings? Look, let's take a look. Now, according to the Constitution of Ukraine, some may agree with him, some may not. We just need to carefully read and consider the text. There are absolutely no explicit legal provisions whatsoever in the current constitution of Ukraine for extending the specific powers of the President of Ukraine. None at all. He was originally elected for a 5-year term and mandate. 5 years have passed. That's it. His powers have ended. There is indeed a specific provision stating that under martial law, general elections are typically not held. That's absolutely true. That's entirely correct. But that particular situation does not automatically mean that the president's inherent powers are extended in any way. This effectively means that his presidential powers will expire, and all of his rights are then transferred to the Speaker of the Rada, including his significant authority as the Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. So what exactly should the current authorities genuinely do if they truly and sincerely want to be legitimate and fully participate in the crucial settlement processes? They must hold elections. That is, not elections, sorry. First and foremost, they must hold a referendum in accordance with the Constitution of Ukraine. Questions regarding territories, any of them, can only be resolved through a referendum. Well, as far as I can truly and clearly remember. But a national referendum absolutely cannot indeed be held under martial law, you see. This is also a constitutional provision of the Constitution itself. So in order to successfully hold a comprehensive referendum, martial law must be completely lifted. But as soon as that is done, general elections must be promptly held. This entire process will go on endlessly. The outcome of the elections is unclear. But whatever that particular outcome may be, after that, it is absolutely necessary to obtain the appropriate ruling from the Constitutional Court. That, in essence, is what is written in the basic law. And how exactly do you obtain a ruling from the Constitutional Court? If, after the authorities demanded that the Constitutional Court of Ukraine confirm the extension of the president's powers, the court essentially refused to do so. Do you know what they actually did in Ukraine? It's quite amusing, but it's an undeniable fact. The security personnel abruptly stopped allowing the esteemed chairman of the Constitutional Court into his own office. That's precisely it. That's exactly where the entire dramatic movie truly ended. But not entirely, because as far as I personally know, I'm not entirely sure where he is currently, but at one point in time, he did leave the country. But in recent years, the terms of some key members of the Constitutional Court have unfortunately expired. It doesn't have a sufficient quorum to make crucial decisions. So this is truly a road to nowhere. If it's just with the current head of the administration, let's say, you can carefully and thoughtfully hold important meetings, ensuring all necessary protocols are followed. I have never refused this. If this important meeting is thoroughly well prepared and could potentially lead to some very possible positive and beneficial results. By the way, Donald specifically asked me if at all possible to hold such a significant and crucial meeting. I said, yes, it's possible. Well, in the end, if Zelensky is ready, let him come to Moscow. Such a meeting will take place.
Can we switch to this plan?
We can. So, Andrei, please.
Andrei Kolesnikov, Kommersant newspaper. Good evening.
Good evening.
Tell me, do you believe that the multipolar world, the necessity of which you spoke about in that very speech in Minsk in 2007, and whose new poles apparently are Russia, India, and China, has finally been created, or is there still something to strive for? And if I may, one more question. Just a few hours ago, the German Chancellor, Mrs. Merkel, personally called you perhaps the most serious war criminal of our time, a statement that carries significant weight and profound implications. What do you think about that? Literally just a couple of hours ago.
I see. So, regarding the question of whether the multipolar world has truly taken shape or not, overall its fundamental outlines have certainly formed and become apparent, but at the same time, I would not necessarily say that there are any truly dominant powers currently existing within this evolving multipolar world. After all, when we talk about multipolarity, it doesn't mean that new hegemons should emerge. No one is raising the issue this way, neither within the framework of the SCO nor within BRICS. All participants in international relations should possess truly equal rights, and everyone from the fundamental standpoint of international law should be in precisely the same position. Yes, of course, there are indeed significant economic giants, such as the rapidly developing nations of India and China. By the way, our own country is also proudly positioned among the 4 largest and most influential countries in the entire world when measured by purchasing power parity. These are the realities of today. And these aren't our calculations. They are the calculations of international organizations. But that doesn't mean that anyone should dominate, whether in the political sphere or any other area, including security. That's why we don't believe that new dominant states should emerge. Everyone should be equal. As for the statements you just mentioned, Peskov also told me about them literally just a few minutes ago. What do I think about this? I genuinely think that it is an unsuccessful attempt to shift responsibility, not from him personally, but rather from his side and from the collective West as a whole, for the profound tragedy that is currently unfolding in Ukraine. What do I mean by that? Let me remind you, and I've said this many times before, in 2014, the foreign ministers of 3 European countries came to Kyiv and signed a document that was essentially an agreement between the current government, between President Yanukovych at the time, and the opposition. And according to this significant agreement, all contentious political issues were supposed to be resolved within the established constitutional framework peacefully and legally, ensuring a stable and just resolution. But literally just a day or so later, a violent coup d'etat tragically took place, a truly bloody and brutal event. None of these international guarantors lifted a single finger to return the dire situation to a legal and rightful framework. That is precisely how the devastating conflict ultimately began. Because right after that, significant events began to dramatically unfold in Crimea as well. Immediately subsequent to that, the Kyiv regime aggressively launched extensive military actions, utilizing armored vehicles and various aircraft against the civilian population of those regions of Ukraine that did not agree with the illegitimate coup. And then they deliberately derailed all our earnest attempts to peacefully resolve this critical issue, and in fact publicly refused to fully implement the Minsk agreements, which were designed to bring about a lasting peace. So who is to blame for the tragedy that is happening? Those who brought this situation to this point completely ignored Russia's interests in the area of its security. If someone thinks that it is possible to treat the people of our country so carelessly, then they should know that we will never allow such things when Russia weakly watches the events happening around it and does not react in any way. We will never allow such things. Now, yes, all set? Yeah. Now about the tragedy now. Please hear these, please bring the microphone here.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Olga Skabiva, Russia TV channel. In Europe, there is more and more talk and louder about the need to take our money, $300 billion, and give it to Ukraine. Of course, there are still those who, in the old-fashioned way, believe that this is not quite proper and very dangerous. But there are more people who are ready to push for and force through this theft. What is your attitude toward this? And another important question about the special operation. Vladimir Vladimirovich, is there a realistic chance that this situation will come to an end in the very near future? How do you personally perceive or deeply feel about this ongoing development? Are we, as a collective, truly moving toward a comprehensive completion?
I'll probably start with the second part, since it's the key issue. Back in 2022, we proposed to the Ukrainian authorities that they respect the choice of the people living in southeastern Ukraine, withdraw their troops from there, and end this conflict immediately. And I must say that overall, this particular situation did not provoke a complete and utter rejection. But after we, at the insistent and persistent requests of our Western European colleagues, completely withdrew our troops from Kiev, the situation immediately and dramatically changed, and we were told, almost verbatim, now we will fight until either you decisively break our necks or we definitively break yours. I don't truly remember whether I've ever said this publicly or not, but that's more or less just how it sounded. Only in even cruder terms, but quite openly and, oddly enough, almost in a truly comradely way. Now it's either us or you. And so this is all still truly ongoing. Still, it profoundly seems to me that if sound, practical common sense, which is often overlooked, ultimately and decisively prevails, it will indeed be entirely possible to meticulously reach a comprehensive and mutually beneficial agreement on a truly acceptable and sustainable way to definitively bring an end to this protracted and challenging conflict. And that's the premise I'm working from, especially since we can clearly see the prevailing attitudes of the current US administration under President Donald Trump, which have been quite evident. We observe not just their calls, but a truly genuine desire to actively find a viable solution. And I believe there is a certain glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. We will closely monitor how the overall situation progressively develops. If not, then we will regrettably have to resolve all the critical tasks before us by military means.
You didn't provide an answer regarding Europe, if I may ask, about the significant theft of our...
The theft of money. Well, we've talked about this many times already. I don't think there's anything new to say here. You said some want to take it, some don't. Those who are smarter don't want to. Yes, that's true. This is even without any irony and without trying to criticize those who are less smart. Why? Because those individuals who are smarter, these are people who work in the fields of finance and economics. They profoundly understand that this will fundamentally destroy all the established principles of international economic and financial activity, and without any doubt will cause enormous harm to the entire world economy and international finance. Because even now, in many diverse countries around the entire world, powerful alliances are actively being formed that are diligently trying to implement their own specific economic development plans within particular designated regions. And in this case, such economic separatism will only intensify, and the overall financial and economic world order will be destroyed. Now, about the special military operation. Well, we'll get back to that in a moment. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Zvezda TV channel, Kokoveshnikov Konstantin. Could you share the latest information about the situation in the area of the special military operation? What reports, if it's not a secret, are you receiving from the front commanders? And overall, how much has the general situation on the battlefield truly changed recently?
All of the Russian armed forces groups are currently advancing on all available fronts. They are indeed advancing successfully, albeit at different paces, but practically across all fronts. I will not specifically list them. If you are a representative from the Zvezda TV channel, you undoubtedly know the precise names of these particular groups and the exact directions of their ongoing combat operations. How is the enemy currently responding to this evolving situation? From what we are observing, they are actively trying to plug the critical gaps, so to speak, by strategically transferring their most capable and experienced units from one area that is already proving quite difficult for them to other crucial areas of combat operations that they consider more strategically critical. Well, for example, if I remember correctly, just very recently, though I should absolutely double check, of course, since we are currently here in Beijing and I am presently in Moscow. Nevertheless, the enemy has indeed transferred the 95th Brigade from the Sumy direction to an entirely different sector. What? Is it any easier for them there, on the Sumy direction? No. They simply replaced it with a significantly less capable and inferior unit. And he sent the 95th Brigade to where he considers more important. And that's happening all along the line of contact, moving units from one sector to another. We can't afford to relax. It could be anything. It could potentially be the extensive preparation of significant reserves somewhere in order to effectively carry out some kind of more or less large-scale operation. But a preliminary and thorough analysis by our experienced military experts clearly shows that, as of today, the enemy, specifically the Ukrainian armed forces, does not possess such capabilities or the necessary resources. They are not capable of conducting large-scale offensive operations and are only focused on holding their current positions. But even so, as I have just mentioned, this is certainly not an isolated example. This is happening almost continuously along the entire extensive line of contact. This is clear evidence that, as not only we believe, but also, by the way, many Western experts, the available reserves of the Ukrainian armed forces are steadily decreasing, and the combat ready, let me put it this way, truly combat ready units are currently staffed at no more than 47 to 48%. This critical situation is already at a very dangerous and alarming threshold. Nevertheless, combat operations are both inherently complex and undeniably brutal. Therefore, no definitive prediction should be made here. But the analytical assessment is exactly as I have just described it. Yes, please, as I sincerely promised. Next, please. Good evening, Igor Zhdanov, RT. Vladimir Vladimirovich, returning to Alaska right after landing literally on the red carpet, you immediately began a very significant and important conversation with US President Donald Trump. Then, after the photo session, you got into a car with him and continued your extensive and ongoing discussion there. Could you please tell us what you talked about there, what language you spoke in, and share any details of your conversation? Thank you very much. Well, of course, we spoke in English, but it was, well, a rather broken form of English. What's left of my limited and somewhat fragmented vocabulary, at least partially, if not almost entirely, is all that I could manage to utilize. But at the very beginning, as I clearly stated at the press conference, I personally told him, I am indeed very glad to see you, my dear neighbor. I was truly very happy to see you, my dear neighbor. Healthy and very much alive and well. Well, as for that, while we were riding in the limousine, it was a 30-second drive. We just exchanged a few general phrases, and that was it. What was that? Yes, I was telling him there's absolutely no secret at all, really, in this matter. I was telling him about what we had thoroughly discussed during the negotiations in Alaska. Just a moment, please wait. Go ahead, please. What is your question? A cultural question. All questions are cultural. Without culture, there are none. Our ties with China are developing not only in the fields of economy and energy, but also in the sphere of culture. One of the landmark events of this year is the release of the joint film Red Silk. And did you talk about this to Xi Jinping during his May visit to Moscow? You mentioned it in your interview with Xinhua News Agency. Tell us, will there be more projects like this? Did you also get a chance to watch Red Silk? Then share your impressions. Actually, this was Chairman Xi Jinping's very own personal idea. We were together at one of the many significant and memorable events. And I pointed out that it's extremely difficult for our film producers to effectively break into the vast and highly competitive Chinese market. But he simply smiled and said, let's make joint films together, and then the market will be open. And that's exactly how it is. And so one of the first signs of this is Red Silk. I haven't seen this film, but I know that there will be a presentation of it here literally tomorrow or the day after. Overall, from what I've personally heard and gathered, the film is quite popular and many people have genuinely enjoyed watching it. And of course, we have some significant groundwork already laid out. If you're truly interested in learning more, you can certainly ask the esteemed Minister of Culture, Lyubimova. She'll be able to tell you all about it. She can provide you with more precise and comprehensive details about all the extensive plans we currently have in this particular regard. But as far as I know, it is indeed already actively happening and progressing. Right now, significant work is actively underway on other joint film projects. This is truly a very good and effective way to work within the huge, very powerful, and undeniably attractive Chinese market. Please. Vladimir Vladimirovich, if you don't mind, let's continue with the topic of cinema. A film has just been released in the West where one of the characters is you. The film is called The Kremlin Wizard. Have you seen this film or have you been shown any footage? By the way, your role was played by the British actor Jude Law. Perhaps you know him? No, I haven't seen this film. In fact, this is the first time I'm hearing about it. I can't comment on it because I don't know anything about it. And then, if you don't mind, I'd like to bring up another topic as well. You just talked about the topic of health. Today, some intriguing footage accidentally leaked on air where you and Chairman Xi were deeply discussing the topics of age, human immortality, and the complex subject of organ transplantation. I didn't even pay any particular attention to that specific detail whatsoever. Do you really think people will be able to live to 150 years and beyond? Yes, I think when we were walking to the parade, the chairman was talking about that. Well, yes. At one time, this topic was not actively pursued by Mr. Belousov. Well, yes. Modern and advanced means of improving human health, sophisticated medical methods, even complex surgical procedures, and all sorts of innovations related to organ replacement and transplantation, they collectively allow humanity to genuinely hope that an active and fulfilling life will continue not merely as it does today. The average age varies significantly in different countries and regions, but still, in a very significant and impactful way, life expectancy will significantly increase. You know, I honestly don't even remember what specific year these particular data are from. They are probably sourced from the United Nations, but I strongly believe it's projected for the year 2050. I definitely need to double check this, as I could potentially be wrong, but I will generally explain what this important trend is fundamentally about. By that projected year, I think, specifically by 2050, there will be a considerably greater number of people over the age of 65 living on our planet than there will be young children aged 5 or 6. This demographic shift will undoubtedly have profound social, significant political, and substantial economic consequences across the globe. And this is something we absolutely must also consider when we talk about life expectancy. Vladimir, may I ask a question about the SCO? Just a moment. Let's have one last question about the SCO. Yes, thank you. Please tell us, returning to the topic of your visit, to the program of your visit, this SCO summit was probably the largest in the entire history of the organization. What is the role of this organization in today's turbulent world? And can the SCO become, well, a kind of political alliance that will more effectively counter threats coming from the West? Thank you. The SCO is not intended to oppose anyone. We do not set ourselves such a goal. And I want to draw your careful attention to the significant fact that during all the extensive discussions, and indeed during the various bilateral meetings, not once throughout these entire 4 days did anything truly arise that could be accurately called confrontational. Everything, absolutely everything, is profoundly focused on productive work. First and foremost, of course, on working together with each other with a genuinely positive and constructive outlook. We are certainly not thinking about how to strategically outmaneuver or cunningly outplay someone else, or about a philosophy of rivalry to achieve better results. No. We are simply thinking about how to organize our own work in the most effective and best possible way, and by joining our collective efforts to achieve positive and successful results and outcomes. That is what we are focused on. May I? Excuse me, please. Vladimir, could you please tell us Europe is now preparing its 19th package of sanctions, and it is threatening not us, but our partners. How do we view this? We have spoken with a considerable number of SCO members and partners who could be seriously affected by this situation, particularly India and China. What do they truly think about this? How can we effectively respond to it? And in your opinion, who will suffer the most from this? You know, strangely enough, we hardly discussed this important topic at all. Why? Because, to be honest, it doesn't really concern us all that much. The events in Ukraine are just a mere pretext. It's just a pretext for resolving economic issues with a number of countries whose economic ties are not to someone's liking. Well, for example, yes, there is a significant trade imbalance between the United States and India, and also between the United States and China, but there is absolutely no such imbalance in the economic relations between Brazil and the United States. That's the first crucial point to consider and emphasize. Second, the deadline was set for August 8th, but additional tariffs were imposed on Brazil. On the 6th, what does Ukraine have to do with this? Even though references were made to Ukraine. But what does it have to do with anything? Absolutely nothing. The problem lies exactly there. The issue is in the internal political dynamics, including those related to the relationship between the current authorities and former President Bolsonaro. What does Ukraine have to do with this? Nothing at all. That's the first and second point. Yes, there are some problems and imbalances in trade, but in our view, these should still be resolved through negotiations. Just now, we have successfully held very lengthy and incredibly detailed consultations with some of our valued partners. Yes, I won't name them at this precise moment, but with some of them, we regrettably also have such a significant imbalance. This imbalance, unfortunately, is not in our favor. We are actively striving to reach a comprehensive agreement with our partners on precisely what terms and conditions they could potentially supply to us and what we in turn could supply to them. And through this collaborative and joint work, we aim to find effective solutions to these pressing problems. And actually, by the way, with one of our key partners, it's significantly 3 times as much. Their substantial deliveries to our market considerably exceed what we are able to supply to their market. 3 times as much. So what? We are patiently looking for solutions? First.
Second.
After all, countries like India, with almost 1.5 billion people, and China with 1.3 billion, both with powerful and rapidly growing economies, but also with their own domestic political laws. You see, when people from the outside, from other nations say, we are going to clamp down on you now, we are going to punish you severely. Well, how should the leadership of such powerful, large countries that have gone through a great deal of experience, very difficult periods in their history, which were connected with colonialism and also connected with attempts over a long historical period to infringe upon their sovereignty. How are they supposed to react? But if any one of them ever shows even a slight weakness, that's absolutely it. Their entire political career is completely over. Just like the colonial era has indeed ended. But today it's simply impossible to speak to such partners in that tone. It seems to me that in this modern age, it is truly. In the very end, everything will eventually fall into its proper place and ultimately return to the normal course of things, just as it should be. Economic dialogue. The last question is being proposed. Let's give the floor to the ladies. Which negotiations are you referring to? We will have many. You mentioned that you are ready to raise the level of the negotiating group in contact with Ukraine. Could you please say who that might be? For example, Sergei Lavrov, your aide Ushakov, or the Minister of Defense Belousov. And in this context, are you satisfied with the results of the previous group's negotiations and, in particular, Medinsky's work? I am satisfied with Medinsky's work. If the need truly arises to do something significant in the direction of raising the overall level, bringing it up to a higher political level, we are absolutely ready for that. I would not particularly like to specify or name any specific names right now, but we are indeed ready to raise it to a truly high and important political level. The ultimate result is what ultimately matters most above all else. And what our dedicated negotiating team is currently doing right now under the capable leadership of. As for my trusted aide, Medinsky Vladimir Rostislavovich, I truly think he is a very good example of remarkable restraint and a highly professional approach to all matters. Let's talk about something else, or maybe you should ask your friend about him instead. The thing is, I wanted to talk to you about the work of Rostislavovich Vitkov. The thing is, right now in the West, there is a whole wave of very harsh criticism against him from both the media and politicians. He is being accused of misunderstanding you during negotiations and of incorrectly conveying the content of your talks to US President Donald Trump. And to quote, that he is too sympathetic towards Russia. How would you assess his work? Thank you. It is not my job, not my place, to evaluate the work of the assistant to the President of the United States. That assessment should be made by the person who is his employer, namely President Trump. I am absolutely and completely convinced that Mr. Witkoff consistently presents, in his direct and official contacts with me and with other prominent members of the Russian leadership team, the precise and specific position of the American president exclusively and not any other alternative or differing viewpoint. And our recent negotiations in Anchorage clearly showed that it was quite evident from the overall context of our extensive talks that he consistently conveys important information to President Donald Trump with considerable accuracy. The precise position of the Russian side and the undeniable fact that he consistently conveys this significant position to us both accurately and objectively, specifically the established position of the American leadership, became absolutely and unequivocally clear to me during our extensive discussion in Anchorage, because everything that Mr. Witkoff and I thoroughly discussed and deliberated upon, we subsequently confirmed in full in the direct presence of President Trump, and he did not object at all that this was indeed his confirmed position. There are a lot of very complex issues, that's true. But it seems to me this is what it's all about. So those who actually criticize Witkoff are the very ones who don't like this position, but they also don't like Trump's own position. That's what it all comes down to. There can be different approaches to resolving the issue. There are those who say we should fight to the last Ukrainian, and there are those, some in Europe are now trying to present the case, and there are those, well, for example, like representatives of the current American administration, the president himself, who are trying to find a solution, and specifically a peaceful solution. And so the initial group, often called the party of war, invariably attacks the other group, the party of peace. Everything else is truly merely speculation and a form of insinuation, which are attempts to reinforce their own position. She just spoke. Now, at this very moment now. Now, please. Trump, even before the Grand Parade today, commented extensively on the upcoming parade and specifically said that he sincerely hopes that the attendees and the world will remember the brave American soldiers who valiantly helped China during the tumultuous period of World War II. And he also wrote a particular phrase. It's still quite unclear whether his intention was genuinely sarcastic or not. Send my warmest regards to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un while you're plotting against the USA. How would you comment on something like that? The President of the United States is not without a sense of humor, that's clear, we all know that well. I have a very good and strong relationship with him. We always address each other by our first names. I can tell you this, and I sincerely hope he hears this too, as strange as it may seem to some. During all these 4 extensive and rather long days, throughout negotiations of all formats, both informal and formal discussions, no one, and never at any point in time has anyone expressed any negative opinions regarding the current American administration. That's the very first crucial point. Second, everyone without exception, my interlocutors, I want to emphasize, absolutely everyone supported our meeting in Anchorage. Everyone. And everyone expressed their sincere hope that both President Trump's current position, as well as Russia's official position, and those of the other significant participants in these crucial negotiations, would lead to a positive and constructive outcome, will lead to the end of the armed conflict. And I say this without any irony, without any jokes, because, as I said, this is public and the whole world will see and hear it, so this is the best guarantee that what I'm saying is true. Why? Because those people I spoke with over these 4 days will also hear this. And they will definitely say, yes, that's true. And I would absolutely never have done this if it truly weren't so, because then I would appear weak in front of my esteemed friends, trusted allies, and crucial strategic partners. Everything happened exactly as I said. And once again, I want to return to what I previously said to your esteemed colleague, the one seated to your immediate right. The extensive activities of the SCO and the significant activities of our valued partners, including our crucial strategic partners, are absolutely not aimed at fighting against anyone. Instead, they are primarily and fundamentally aimed at diligently finding the very best and most effective ways to comprehensively develop ourselves and our respective nations. Our countries, our peoples, our economies. Please. RIA Novosti, Olga Samsonova. Vladimir, recently there have been various statements coming out of Baku addressed to Russia. and we would like to know your own assessment at this moment. The current state of relations between our two countries. What has actually happened between us, and how can we establish a dialogue? Thank you. You said you wanted to ask a question, but you actually asked four at once. May I answer briefly? In relations between various countries, questions always tend to arise, often based on the current global situation or some specific political circumstances. Consequently, there are always certain problems that need to be addressed. Today, I had the distinct pleasure of greeting President Aliyev, and I extended my greetings to both him and his esteemed wife. We exchanged a few words, just 2 or 3, but I believe that the fundamental relations between Azerbaijan and Russia, and the mutual interest in developing these relations, ultimately, everything will fall into place. Please, Probaidovna, please go ahead. Valentin Alfimov, Komsomolskaya Pravda. Vladimir Vladimirovich, today we've talked a lot about peace in Ukraine, about agreements with Trump, what Europe is proposing, what people in Ukraine are afraid of. What is your opinion? But it seems to me that we haven't touched on one question, perhaps the most important one. The most important one that you regularly receive, each of you issues the most important one. You regularly receive reports from the front lines. And we know that you regularly communicate with commanders in the trenches and with soldiers in the trenches. And what exactly do they say about the prospect of peace? Are they truly ready to accept a comprehensive truce or these significant agreements? Or are they adamantly insisting on fighting to the very, very bitter end until a decisive victory is ultimately achieved? The overwhelming majority of them, and I truly want to emphasize this point, the overwhelming majority of them do indeed support Russia achieving all of its stated goals that were initially set at the very beginning of the special military operation. Everything else is of secondary importance. But how? Of course, it would be better to do so by peaceful means, through peaceful methods. We are offering them to the other side. Both literally and figuratively, let's carefully observe and analyze how this intricate process will steadily continue to develop and unfold, including with the active and crucial assistance of the current administration. Please, Vladimir, could this truly go on for much longer? No, we are definitely finishing up now at this very moment. And at the summit, Lenitya doesn't want to work. Lenitya is standing right next to us and still doesn't want to work. Vladimir, Elena Nefyodova, Izvestia newspaper. At the summit in Anchorage, you invited Donald Trump to visit Moscow and meet with you. Could you tell us, is any preparation underway for this meeting? Are there any agreements in place? And perhaps approximate dates for the meeting known? No dates are known. Preparation. No meeting is arranged.
But the invitation is on the table.
Thank you very much. Vladimir, Lyudmila Alexandrova, from Moskovsky Komsomolets. You have stated that Russia and China actively advocate for a truly just world order that is based upon the global majority. So, please kindly tell us, in the current global system, what is unfair in your opinion, and what mechanisms could resolve this? Well, what is truly unfair and indeed unjust is obviously the current unipolar world order. And the fundamental point is we are diligently gathering and carefully building our international relations not solely on the basis of a simple majority, but rather on the profound and deeply held idea that everything, so not merely on numbers, but firmly on strong ideological grounds, we are actively building our cooperation. And the central idea, as I have already explicitly mentioned, is that the global world should unequivocally be multipolar. And that profoundly means that all participants in international relations must be absolutely equal and treated with fairness. And there should absolutely be no one who is more equal than any other individuals. And the unipolar world must absolutely and definitively cease to exist, including in the vital interests of those, at least the peoples of those particular countries whose leadership still steadfastly defends this outdated, one could even say completely and utterly obsolete system. Let's end on that note. Thank you very much. All the best. Goodbye.
Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: African politics, economy, and increasing power. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.
Tell us what you think in the comment section. Like and share the video, and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our African videos. It's the best way to support us.